There's a case to be made that says the Tesla Model 3 is one of the most important cars of the past decade. It is, after all, arguably better placed than any other to capitalise on what now looks like it's going to be a sustained shift towards electric motoring. The reason for that, of course, is that Tesla has been at the forefront of the electric car movement at a time when the mainstream manufacturers weren't talking about or perhaps even thinking about EV tech. There was this startup rethinking the motor car from the ground up. And it's not just that the Model S, the Model X and the Model 3 are electric either. It's that they represent a whole new way of thinking about cars and how you interact with them. And what's really interesting is now that the mainstream manufacturers are racing to build electric cars as fast as they can, a lot of the themes they talk about, like the big touchscreen interface and over-the-air software updates and a whole new way of mobility, well, that's all surely come from Tesla. So in this CarGurus UK review, let's take a closer look at the Model 3 for all those people who are wondering if it might just be the car to convert them to electric driving. If you enjoy the video, please do let us know in the comments and give us a like. And if you subscribe, remember to also turn on notifications so you'll know when our new videos go live. So if you're thinking about buying an electric car, and a Tesla in particular, then one thing you might be aware of is that they are very, very fast. This is the Model 3 performance. This is the top spec one. Now 0 to 60, it's not quite as quick as a Model S, but it'll still do it in 3.2 seconds. Now that's just about as fast as you can get in a road car. And the thing to remember here is this isn't some stripped out road racer either. It isn't even a sports car comes out. This is a 5-seat family car. So if you're on a test drive, one thing you might ask to do if you have the space and it's safe is a 0 to 60 mile an hour run. Now we'll drop in some footage here of what that looks like from outside the car and the dial accelerating as well. But that's not always going to be possible. What you should definitely do is just feel what it's like when you're rolling and you pin the throttle, because the response is instant, and in this dual motor model, the thrust is unbelievable. It's almost uncomfortably fast. Not that I want to go too crazy with the acceleration today, because actually what I and no doubt many potential Model 3 buyers will also want to know is what the official range is and how realistic those figures are. Tesla says that the standard Model 3 is good for a range of around 250 miles from a full charge, and that this Model 3 Performance will do up to 329 miles in official tests. Now, if you want to see a video of somebody taking a Model 3 with a full battery and running it down to flat to see how far they can get, there are loads of them on YouTube that are worth checking out. I don't actually want to do that today, because what I think is more relevant, and I say this as an electric car owner myself, I've got an i3, is how real world mileage compares to what's indicated on the battery range. Or to put another way, if you do 50 or 100 miles in normal driving, does that equate to 50 or 100 miles less on the battery range? We've been on A roads, B roads, motorways, in cities, towns and villages, and now we find ourselves on this beautiful coastal road in the south of England. And that will allow me to talk about the ride and handling of the Model 3 in a minute, but first I will talk about range. So we started off in central London with 303 miles indicated on the battery range. Now we're down here, we've got 93 miles indicated. Now I know our total driving distance is around 165 miles, so there is a discrepancy there. But there's a couple of things I want to point out. One, driving for camera is not the most efficient way of driving all the time, because you're quite often stopping and then accelerating quickly up to speed so that the car's at the right speed when you pass through the frame. Also, we have had a bit of fun with the acceleration because, quite frankly, it's hard to resist. So that will also have eaten into battery power, just like in a petrol or diesel car. If you really start to use the performance, you will consume more fuel. Now, there are three other things I want to talk about when it comes to range as well. The first is that even with all that driving, we still have almost 100 miles of range left, so I'm confident that I can get to a charger. Second, we have this really useful range indicator on the Model 3, it's on other Teslas as well, and this allows you to see how your recent driving behaviour affects your projected range. The third thing that's really important to mention, and I say this like I say I've got an i3 myself, so I'm an electric car owner, is that when you have one of these things, you very quickly change your driving habits, so you don't drive from full to empty before you refill again in the way that you might in a petrol or a diesel car. Instead, you drive as much as you feel convenient, and then you plug in when you can. And that very quickly becomes a really normal process, particularly if you've got a home charger where you can just plug in when you get back. It all of a sudden makes perfect sense. Speaking of chargers, Tesla's network of superchargers and destination chargers is a huge asset. It makes doing very long trips in its cars extremely easy. Plug into a supercharger and a Model 3 can take on 170 miles of range in around 30 minutes. A full charge from home is an overnight job. So what about the ride and the handling then? Well, let's start with the ride. Now, this is a performance model, like we said, and that means it gets 20-inch wheels and lowered sports suspension. So it's arguably not the most comfortable specification of Model 3 that there is. And I'd say it's probably not as comfortable as a Mercedes C-Class or an Audi A4. However, it's still a pretty calm ride on a smooth, flowing A-road like this. It's really good actually, and it feels very well tied down. Now in town, where there's a bit more in the way of bumps in the road, you do feel it bumping around a bit, but it's far from terrible. I wouldn't call it an uncomfortable car. The other thing to think about in terms of comfort is refinement. Now, electric cars tend to be really good in this area, and the Model 3 certainly is. In fact, the only thing you really notice is there's quite a lot of wind noise around the wing mirrors at motorway speeds. But to be honest, you only notice that as much as you do because the rest of the car is so quiet. As for the handling, well, yeah, that's good too, actually. So this performance model has dual motors, so that means it's four-wheel drive, and that means it has loads and loads of grip. It's actually unbelievable just how well the Model 3 grips. And of course, you've got that accelerative punch as well, so you really can zip through corners. The steering's good too, it's sharp, it doesn't have much in the way of slack to it, and you can adjust the weight of it via the touchscreen if you want to. And what you don't get in the Model 3 is much delicacy or feedback through the controls in the same way that you might in a Jaguar XE. So if you look at that and the way the Jaguar also flows down a road so nicely, you might say it's the better driver's car. But actually the Tesla's still a lot of fun because it's just so instant in the way it does stuff. So if you don't want that delicacy from your car and instead you just want a car that will just deconstruct a road in a very efficient way, I would say the Model 3 can still be a lot of fun. Right, I just want to talk a bit now about the size and practicality of the Model 3, because if you're wanting this as a family car, those are going to be really important considerations. So size-wise, as we say, it's kind of 3 Series Audi A4, but the practicality is quite a different proposition to those cars because obviously there's no internal combustion engine, so you get a useful storage area under the front, and the main boot, it looks like it's going to be a hatchback, doesn't it? But it's not, it's actually a saloon. And it's big, you get a lot of space in here. It's got all our camera gubbins in at the moment, but see, it goes all the way back there. It's a decent shape, the rear seats fold if you need them to, and you get under here kind of a well where you can chuck cables and all those sorts of things so they don't take up space in the boot. The one thing I would say, closing this, there are a couple of areas in the Model 3 where you can tell it's not quite as plush as a 3 Series or an Audi A4, and that sound when you shut the boot is definitely one of them. Is it going to put you off buying one? No, it's probably not, to be honest, but it's just worth bearing in mind. So, space in the back. Leg room, really good. Headroom, yeah, that's good too. Actually, to the point, this glass roof buys quite a lot of headroom because you don't have the headlining and stuff, and that's allowed Tesla to push the seats back, which obviously then helps with legroom as well. You've got a couple of USB sockets down here for charging, that's quite helpful. And this middle seat, it's actually fairly comfortable, particularly because you've got this flat floor, that helps as well. Ultimately, it's still not the widest car, so if you're going to get 3 in here, it's going to feel a bit tight. But for this class of vehicle, I'd say it's definitely up there. It's really quite a practical thing. Inside the front of the car, meanwhile, it's like nothing else currently on sale. So this interior then, to be honest, I think it's great. I love that Tesla has just reimagined what a car interior should be like without any of the baggage of having been designing cars for decades. So you only get 2 buttons. That's the main thing you notice. Like, a lot of car manufacturers go minimalist in their interiors these days, but Tesla really has gone minimalist. Everything else is through this touchscreen. Now we'll look at that in a sec. First, I also want to say, look how much storage there is in here. There's storage there where your videographer can leave his snacks. Thanks for that. There's more storage under there, quite a lot of it in fact. There's obviously a glove box, which isn't massive, but it's fine. The door pockets are a good size, cup holders, all that sort of stuff. The Model 3 does really well. Now this screen, so for the most part, I think this is really successful. It's very quick to use in terms of the software. Once you know your way around it, the controls are all easy to find. The bits that are slightly more awkward, like for example adjusting the wing mirrors, the quickest way to do that is actually to move the seat, I've found. Then you get the wing mirror controls up and then you adjust each one using the toggle here. That's not as easy as having a control here, but nor is it a disaster. And I also like the way Tesla's had a bit of fun with this. So things like, oh yeah, I mean, that's funny, isn't it? But also you can play games in here, you can surf the web, just things that are fun if you're sitting around with a bit of time to spare. Actually, the Tesla is quite a nice place to be. So yeah, I mean, is the quality as good as a 3 Series or an Audi A4? Maybe not quite, but it's really close. I don't think most people are going to have a problem with the quality feel inside a Model 3. No, I think this is a real success. So what's the takeaway here then? Is the Model 3 the most important car of the past decade? I think there's certainly a very strong argument that says it is, and not just because it brings long-range electric motoring to a class that's previously been dominated by cars like the 3 Series and Audi A4, and in some cases it's actually beating them. And it's not just because it's novel either. No, I think the Model 3 is important because it moves things on in a really significant way. And it's very easy to say that it's amazing what Tesla has achieved in such a short space of time in that regard. But actually, I think you need to turn it the other way, because actually the existing manufacturers with their long histories and well-established processes probably couldn't have come up with something like the Model 3, and probably wouldn't be coming up with a lot of the electric cars they are now without Tesla being on the scene. This car, I think, is a little slice of genius. Are you a fan of the Model 3, or would your electric car of choice be something different? Let us know in the comments. Please do subscribe and turn on notifications as well. And remember, when it comes to finding your next car, you can easily find great deals from top-rated dealers at cargurus.co.uk.